Hi, Hassan.
Hi, Nadia.
Hello. And what were we saying earlier? Like, this was compelling to me because it seems like a very important project to you. And I wanted to start off with a hello and welcome to Oman FM. I have been following your work for quite a while now, thanks to shout out to our program director, Abdullah Al-Mawali. He showed us your Substack initially and showed us your writing and the way you have this lens of looking at Oman and describing different parts of this place, especially Muscat, in a way that's very nostalgic. So we were very drawn to you and we were fans right away. And so you've also been running an oral history project titled In Their Wake. And it was displayed as part of an exhibition with Mukhtabar Research Lab. Could you tell us a bit more about that project?
Right. So In Their Wake, as you mentioned, is an oral history project that also leans a little bit on material memory. But this project essentially aims to document the lives of first-generation migrants to Oman, but particularly with a focus on South Asian countries. So India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, migrants that came to Oman from these countries around the 1970s, around the time the Renaissance happened. And the reason that I really wanted to focus on this particular era or epoch was that whenever you look at social media and there's anything that's Oman related, you immediately see a flood of comments. You know, people are like, oh, I love Oman and I love home and I miss home and I miss remembering home. And there's just such an outpouring of love that happens for the country. But most of this outpouring is actually from people that aren't here anymore, that were here for a very fundamental period of their lives, usually their primary education, after which they move on out, and some of them come back and most of them don't. But they still have this yearning for a place called home, and that place is Oman. And I happen to be one of those people. But I started thinking about what made this possible. How on earth did a person like me, who's originally from India, my parents originally hailed from India, ever came to be in a country such as Oman, as opposed to anywhere else in the world? And this got me thinking about migration and how generally migration studies are focused on people migrating from a place such as India to the West. You'd have the US, UK, Canada, Australia, places like that. But whenever it comes to academic studies, the Gulf is a place that's really not focused upon at all. And if at all it is, you focus on the UAE, you focus on Bahrain, places like that have been more in the spotlight and in colonial times have been more, so to say, seats of power. And that's why I saw that there was a gap over here. Things did happen over here. It's not like in the 60s and 70s or years before that. Nothing was going on in Oman. People were migrating over here. Lives were being lived. Lives were being built. And I just wanted to explore that because that is why we are here now. You know, those migrations that were made around the Renaissance, way before that, a little after that, that's why people like me can be here and we can profess a love for this country that we now call home. And as for Mukhtabar Research Lab, that was part of Urban October with the Ministry of Housing and Planning. They invited me to be part of this exhibition because they were focusing on a range of the Matra Cornish with buildings that were built in the 70s that would be termed as modern heritage. And one of the stories that are part of my project basically fell right into the scope of their work. And so it just made a lot of sense to align those two and to bring the story of this building that I'll talk about later into it.
Earlier, you mentioned material memory. So a large part of your project incorporates material memory. Could you describe the different pieces and elements of this body of work?
Absolutely. So I was hugely inspired by the work of oral historian Aanchal Malhotra. She's an Indian oral historian and her work largely focuses on the Indian partition, which is when India was divided into India and Pakistan. She has basically, the partition can largely be considered an academic subject in terms of the way that it's treated, but her work makes it extremely accessible. And she tells this through stories of objects that people carry with them through a very cataclysmic event such as the partition. So while families were moving from Pakistan to India or from India to Pakistan, she traces down objects such as utensils, vessels, incense holders, things like that might not seem essential at a very cataclysmic time, but people carried it nonetheless because of the bond that they had with that object, with the emotional ties of that object. And then she talks to them and she understands that whole era through their eyes, through the object as a gateway. And that's what I was super inspired by. And I wanted to bring that lens to Oman as well. I didn't want it to be an academic white paperish telling of these stories. I instead wanted to trace similar objects with great historicity and then bring that to people. To me, it was really important to bring this object or area of study out of like an academic context, because the people that would be extremely interested and for whom this was important wouldn't necessarily be reading academic papers. So for me, it was important to use these objects as a tool to make it super accessible, because we're talking about younger age groups over here. And so for me particularly, that was reliance upon photographs or pens or old ledger books that people used to have, or something that their father handed down to them and they now have. So, and it was very rewarding for me to be doing that, because I've discovered so many things. At one point in time, I happened to be sitting in a coffee shop with one of the people that were part of my study, and in my hands belonged a pair of, I was holding a pair of glasses that this person's ancestor who came to Oman in 1797, he actually wore, and I had them like in my hand right there with me. And so things like this really came together, and for me, there's just so many objects that I can tell these stories through. And so material memory was a big tool for me, actually.
Since you work so much with the history, right? So history involves a lot of facts and accurate representation. How do you balance that with the personal and the emotional truth of a lot of these narratives and a lot of the objects that are holding those things?
Right. So what really comes in handy at times such as this is the actual archive that people themselves have built over the span of their life. But to me, what really matters more with oral history is the factual accuracy of their emotions and how they felt at that point in time. How did they realize their reality at that point in time is what's super important to me. And then obviously when, you have a few numbers and years that come in, like people aren't always going to accurately remember what the date was or what year it was 40 years ago. But how they felt is something that they can accurately remember and bring back. So that's what's more important to me. And when something does come in that I'm a little dubious about, I usually try to refer to different sources, just triangulate if things did happen in proximity, because you can forgive a person who's gone through a lot, at not remembering the exact date of a certain event or a certain, juncture in time.
For you, then, why did this project receive the title In Their Wake?
Right. Well, for a couple of reasons. One, because my focus area for this was Muscat and Matra. And, these areas wouldn't exactly be themselves if it wasn't for the sea that was adjacent to them. Everything that they've become, the stature that they currently hold, is because of the Indian Ocean network and the trade that was plied, cultures that were exchanged, people, that traveled between countries from here to Pakistan to India, and all of the cities along their shores. And there's a very and I was on a boat, actually. I was on a boat at Qantab, and I was with my family, and as the boat plied on, I just saw the churn of the water behind me, and I just imagined how many other people over the years would have plied the same route on these exact same waters, and what would have they seen at that point in time? How different would the coast have been for them? And I saw that water behind me, and it was so bright and white and as well transient. And it's bright for a very short span of time, and then it just fades. And to me, I felt like if I didn't do the work of recording a few memories so that I could then pass them down to people that came after me, those memories would eventually fade away with time. And then there would be no reversal. So what I had right now was the wake of a boat. And it also connected to how so many of these people that I cared about arrived to Muscat on a boat, when the ocean was what kind of accelerated the evolution, and you didn't exactly have airlines flying through. So that's why I named it In Their Wake.
And who is the there in their wake?
There happens to be the first generation immigrants that came here. To me, the first area of focus was the 70s exactly, the 70s and the 80s, because I wanted to know exactly how life was for them. Because I tried to imagine if I was them and I came here in the 70s, how would life be like for me? And I thought that would be extremely difficult because of the contrast. Firstly, if it was a person like me, I'd be coming here from Bombay. And Bombay at that point in time, it was in its golden era. You had jazz, you had culture, everything was booming, cinema, everything. And to come here would mean saying goodbye to a whole lot of things. And when you did get here, Oman was still coming into being. It was becoming the modern nation state that it is. So you wouldn't have all the amenities that one would have desired. It wouldn't have been easy to call home. It wouldn't have been easy to get food that I would have wanted to eat. But you would have had to make a home out of it. You would have to belong. You would have to get creative about it. And so it's these people that first came here in the 70s that basically the there is for. Yeah.
And could you tell us about the families that you focused on and their relationship with Oman?
So presently, this volume 1 of In Their Wake that I've just produced focuses on 2 stories. The first is, it's called The Architecture of Belonging, Ramesh Bhavan, which is about a building on the Corniche. It was constructed in 1943 and it belongs to a Gujarati Banyan family. And it's the story of how that building came into being. Because when you look at the building, the architecture of it is fascinating. It's super narrow. It's very different to everything on its right and on its left in the Corniche. You have its name inscribed in both Arabic as well as Gujarati script. And language, it acts as a gate. It invites as well as keeps out. And to me, seeing that name inscribed there on this prime piece of, waterfront property, even today, I wondered about that. I wondered about that a lot. And when I dug deeper, I realized that the story actually begins in 1650 because the family has been here for 14 generations. And I basically traced that arc all the way from 1650 to now that culminates in the presence of this house on the Corniche. So that was one of my stories. And the second one was, this is like really close to me. It is the life story of Dr. Syed Muhammad Rafe by his son, Dr. Akbar Rafe. So Dr. Syed Muhammad Rafe, actually, his story is different because the general route of migration to Oman actually happens from Gujarat, a place called Kutch Mandvi, and that's the most popular route. But his story, he has risen to prominence and how in Oman, and he actually comes from Bihar, which is a landlocked state. So there's no proximity to the ocean when you come from Bihar. But still, he found his way to Oman, first the interior, then the coast, and he rose basically in the ranks to become the personal physician to late His Majesty Sultan Qaboos's family, So to me, it's really important because one, it presents a medical history of Oman itself, because he came here in the 1950s when healthcare wasn't perfectly institutionalized. He came to Samal, he started working there, and his story is absolutely fascinating. But what's so touching about the story is that Dr. Akbar Rafe actually did the whole work of archiving, documenting his father's legacy, and then he made a book out of it. I'm here, I've done a couple of stories, and I'm talking about it, but this man has quietly done everything. He's written the books, he's collected the photographs, he's done all of his research, and out of love and devotion for his father, he has already produced the book. So when I actually met him, I was so stunned and in awe of him that I didn't know what to write, because in front of me there was a story that already existed, and there was the story of like filial devotion and parental love that I then wanted to write. And so that's what I've covered a little bit of. These are the 2 families for volume 1.
In studying and following these families, were you able to uncover anything about the relationship between belonging and migration?
I think belonging and migration, when I've spoken to them, are so intertwined. We think of migration as a linear route, where if someone's traveled once, it doesn't really end there. Because once you make that journey across an ocean, you basically become transnational, which is where you have 2 places or more than one place that you call home. And what I've seen with these families is that they really wrestle with it a lot, and that belonging is an everyday act. You make a creative attempt to belong every single day, and you can't really say that you have just belonged. In fact, with them as well, and with me, the stories that they've written down, the stories that they've archived, the reason that they keep their photographs and their permits and even receipts to older hospitals, things like this, the reason they keep them so carefully is because to them that is a marker of their belonging. They have that as proof of like, hey, we made this journey, and hey, we belong because look at how old this is. Look at how many years we've been here. So each day that passes, every second that ticks on the clock, I think everyone is trying to affirm their belonging, because you never really fully belong to any one place once you make a migratory journey. So I think it is a resilient effort that everyone that has migrated makes every single day. And with these families in particular, I see it's a gorgeous like blend of 2 places that you see in them. It's like they belong to both places, but also not anyone at a single time. And I think it's beautiful when you meet them.
Yeah. Is that how you feel? Like, because I'm sensing that you have not just a lot of intellectual interest in these stories, but also a lot of personal stake in them. So what was important to you about pursuing this project?
Well, I basically found myself in a position where, despite having grown up here, I never really felt like I completely belonged here. And to be honest, this project is an act of belonging as well. Because to me, I was a question mark in itself, because I told people that I was from Oman, but I wasn't Omani, so I definitely wasn't Omani enough. But then when I went to other countries, I was technically Indian, but I hadn't grown up there, so I wasn't Indian enough. And I never really felt like I was either of those two places. And to me, I just had to put my foot down for myself. And I was like, I'm going to figure out why and what it means for me to be here. And if I can't make meaning out of it, like every day just living life, I'm going to go back and I'm going to see everyone that did it before me. And I want to learn from them. And I want to see what they did. And then maybe I'll make some meaning out of all of this. And so honestly, in their wake, a huge part of this is that I just wanted to learn how it would have been if I was in their place, you know, and all of the contributions that they've made to make this a place that we love. I wanted for it to be documented so that not me, but the person that's born after me or after them, I just hope that they have some bedrock of information that they can derive from and have a better sense of personal identity, as opposed to just being a personal ghost or a lacuna, you know?
Yeah, because this particular project, because it's so intimate in a way, it's focusing on what you called earlier material memory. It's focusing on objects and the stories of the people, the lived histories. Because of all that, I think you are giving people a better sense of belonging through these narratives, because that is what really creates that sense of like, I belong here. It's because these stories are my stories. And for someone like you, who in a way is what they call a third culture kid now, in a way, the question of belonging is trickier because there isn't a narrative, a universal narrative for that type of life.
Right.
But the fact that you've provided that here is so compelling. And you're right, like in the future, there will be people who will find themselves in your work and see, you know, I may not have lived in one place or the other, but I've been able to discover that home is something I carry with me everywhere. And the fact that you use objects in particular to tell these stories is really, it's a very unique thing. And I wish that this exhibition actually lasted longer, because I would recommend for all of our listeners to check it out. And hopefully it will, again, be on display soon. I want to go back a little bit and discuss the city of Matra. So why was Matra the chosen setting for this?
Because Matra is such a palimpsest, it has been written on over and over and over again. It's almost like Matra isn't any one thing in itself, but it is the product of everything that has happened to it, of all of the exchanges that have taken place over the years. You know, even historically, when you look at the research, at any given point in time, people that were there in the 1800s, 1700s would say that you hear 12 languages being spoken at any given point in time, you know, and people were able to fully be themselves. They didn't have to kind of curtail themselves or kind of become something else just because they came to Matra. And I think it's for this reason that there are so many different points in time and so many different layers of Matra that you can even today just pick out and point at. Matra was a very good setting for this reason. What we wanted to look at in particular was what happened post the Renaissance and what really came up after that. The buildings that were, the architecture primarily post 70s. And my personal contribution to that was that you had this one building then that was just standing out right next to all of these 70s buildings. And I think that is a testament to how unique Matra is in itself, you know. In
telling the story of a place and a people and, you know, curating the objects that will tell these stories, how do you choose which objects to highlight and which to allow to gather dust?
Okay, that is a really nice question. I think when your work is a living and breathing work, when it's something that is not finite, you know that what you want to do is present as much of an existing reality as possible. If it were up to me, you know, my first volume edition of this wouldn't be 100 pages. It might have been 1,000 pages because I would have wanted to cover absolutely every story that I've come across. And in not doing so, literally the only filter that exists is that I want to present the broadest possible picture to someone who exists in this attention economy, where they're not going to sit with something for hours at end and actually go through everything. So the reason I chose these two stories is because it presents two very kind of diverse ends of the spectrum in terms of what kind of people came to Oman and what kind of contributions were made to it. In leaving out something, I don't feel like the feeling with me is not that I have left out something, it's that I have left the clue for someone else to come finding what I have left out, you know? That's the way that I look at it. That's
so wonderfully said. Well, thank you so much, Hassan, for being here. You said earlier that you had a fact about seafaring routes and the, you know, how they have helped also shape the narrative around migration. Could you share that fact?
Right. So I basically found out that at a certain point in time, you had a common currency across the Indian Ocean network wherever the British had a bit of an influence, and it was basically called the Gulf Rupee. And this kind of blew my mind because, I mean, we're such staunch supporters of the Omani Riyal, and the fact that you had something like a rupee that was operating in these lands, this was the currency that was flowing around over here, that completely blew my mind. But then, in addition to this, I think an actual naval historian would be able to tell you so much more about the seafaring routes and trade that plied through. But there is a really cool story that I know in particular that has been conveyed to me by Mr. Vimal Purecha about Matra in particular. So obviously before the Corniche was built, you had basically the water coming right up to buildings, right? And so when you had water coming right up to buildings, you had people on boats coming right up to buildings to sell you things. So whether that was vegetables or it was dried fish or just fish that was freshly caught, just then. And he would tell me that as soon as the sun went down, all of these people that would be on their boats, they would kind of gather right in the middle of the ocean. So imagine like a flower, but built out of boats just aligned together. And they would light small fires so that they could start preparing their dinner. And once they were done, you had that little candlelight kind of display on the water. They'd start singing songs and they'd start dancing on their boats. So they'd make music right out there on the Corniche. And all of this was just, a daily affair. So it kind of just goes to say how the rhythms of life were so different, at that particular point in time. And as far as seafaring goes, everything has happened because boats were plying through, It's called the Indian Ocean Network for a reason because, it was kind of like a pinball machine, boats going from one place to the other. Like people would have to stop, like there was no direct routes basically. People would have to stop from port city to port city before they got anywhere, so that was a necessity. And the way that everything was connected is that if you had to go anywhere, even if you wanted to get on a boat from say Sur to India, you had to cross all of the ports that came before it before you could do that. There was no way for you to just take a direct ship anywhere. So in a way, this really connected people. So you had marriages that were happening in different cities that you wouldn't have previously imagined. You had trade relations being built because of this, because someone that was in Afghanistan and had good trade routes over there was of interest to someone that was in Muscat. And so that's how, business relationships were being built. It really, really connected the whole region as a whole.
Yeah, Muscat Matra in particular, it sounds like, was such a hub for connection.
Yeah.
As for your work, what do you hope Omani audiences will see in it?
Honestly, I'd wish for Omani audiences to see what I'd want for any audience to see, is that there were a lot of people that came here because coming here wasn't simply an easy act wherein if you came here, you'd have a good life, you'd make money and then you could send that money home. The migratory experience was not a monolith, There are various colors, various hues of it, and everyone went through a different experience. And what came out of that experience is that they made this country a better place for everyone through their contributions, through their labor. And whilst they were doing all of that, they were battling inner labors themselves. They were battling the heartbreak that comes with not being at home, or moving away from a country that you've grown up in or you've been born in. And I think just knowing what everyone has gone through or goes through just enables better friendship, better connections, genuine community, which is what we need. Because today I feel like, and it's not just a local problem, but we genuinely just tend to exist in silos because of social media, and we have a layer of resistance before getting to know someone. But once we make an attempt to get to know what their story is and where they've come from and what that was like, I think, we can foster genuine community, which is what the world needs.
What about for people from the migrant communities that are represented in your work? What do you hope they'll recognize in it?
I think that there is empowerment where you are and in who you are, that even though you're a chimera and that you might belong to two places but not a single place at once, in knowing and trying to find out where it is that you come from by looking for stories, by actually keeping records and documenting what it is that made you what you are, I think there's a lot of empowerment there, and that it's convenient to feel lost, but I think there is an empowering way of being as well, which is a creative way of being, by trying to figure out who you are and creating a trace out of it.
That was so well said. Thank you so much. As for your project, what are the plans to expand on it? Are there plans to expand on it?
I think I thought about this a lot because I had so much pressure on me when I woke up every day, even though this is completely something that I'm doing myself. There is no one else that's asking me to do this. But just knowing that this is something that I have that's ongoing, I felt a lot of pressure to, contribute to it on a daily basis, to do something about it. And then I realized that this is not something that you just finish in a year and then you submit, and it never ends, basically. This is a lifetime's work, and it keeps on going. It keeps on going, and as many stories as I keep finding, I think there will be subsequent additions to this project, and we'll keep documenting, and we'll keep representing, and we'll keep doing the work. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hassan, and thank you again for being here at Oman FM with us. We are big fans and we support your work wholeheartedly. I was wondering, for our audience and for people who are interested in supporting your work, following your work, where can they do that?
On Instagram, we have an ongoing Instagram page that's a bit inactive right now, but we'll be posting stuff on it. It's called @InTheirWakeOman. And you can also follow my Instagram page, Hassan of Arabia, where I also post work in collaboration.